One day, you're going to look at the spot where your dog used to wait for you and realize there were things they needed from you that you never even noticed. Daniel never thought of himself as a bad dog owner, not even close. He fed Max the best food he could afford, took him on walks around the neighborhood every evening, and made sure he had a warm place to sleep at night. And if you asked anyone, they'd say Max was a lucky dog, always wagging his tail, always close by, always looking at Daniel like he was the center of everything. But what Daniel didn't understand was that for Max, it was never about the food, or the walks, or even the routine. It was about something much quieter, something so small most people overlook it every single day, because dogs don't measure love the way humans do. They don't count hours or dollars or effort. They measure moments, the ones where you slow down, where you notice them, where you choose them, even for just a few seconds. And every morning, before Daniel grabbed his phone, before he checked the time, before he even fully woke up, Max was already there, watching him, waiting, not for a command, not for breakfast, but for a simple acknowledgement, a look, a soft word, something that said I see you, because in Max's world, those first few minutes weren't just another part of the day, they were the foundation of everything that came after. And most mornings, Daniel missed it, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't know it mattered. He'd roll out of bed, distracted, already thinking about work, already somewhere else, while Max stayed behind, quiet, patient, still hoping that maybe today would be different. Maybe today Daniel would notice. And the truth is, this is where almost every dog owner gets it wrong, not in the big things, but in the small ones, the invisible ones, the moments that don't feel important to us but mean everything to them. Because to your dog, you are not just part of their life, you are their entire world, and every single day, they are hoping, in their own silent way, that you'll show them love in ways that actually reach them, not just ways that make sense to you. And there are 6 of those moments, 6 simple acts of love that your dog has been waiting for, not just today, not just this week, but for their entire life. There is a quiet misunderstanding that almost every dog owner carries without realizing it, the belief that love is something you show through care, through providing, through doing all the right things. And in Daniel's mind, that was exactly what he had been doing. He had built a routine that kept Max safe, fed, and exercised, and on the surface, it looked like a good life, a stable life, the kind of life any dog would be lucky to have. But what Daniel had not yet seen was that Max was not responding to the routine itself, he was responding to the meaning behind the moments inside it, and those moments were becoming fewer than Daniel thought, because dogs do not experience time the way humans do. They do not divide their day into tasks or schedules or priorities. They experience it as a series of emotional checkpoints, small interactions that tell them whether they are close to you or drifting further away. And when those checkpoints are missed, the day does not feel full to them. It feels incomplete, no matter how many walks or meals were included. And that is the part that most people never notice, because nothing dramatic happens. The dog does not suddenly stop loving you, does not act out or demand more. Instead, they adapt, they soften their expectations, they learn to find comfort in less, and from the outside, it looks like everything is fine, but inside, something subtle is changing. The intensity of their anticipation, the way they wait, the way they look at you. When you enter the room, all of it begins to shift in ways that are almost invisible unless you know what to look for. And Max was no different. He still followed Daniel from room to room, still laid near him at night, still greeted him at the door. But the energy behind those actions was quieter now, more measured, as if he had learned that not every moment would be met the way he hoped. And that is where the real disconnect lies. Not in what you do for your dog, but in what your dog quietly stops expecting from you, because once those expectations fade, they rarely come back on their own. And this is why understanding what your dog actually needs emotionally is not just important, it is everything, because there are specific moments, very small ones, that carry more weight than anything else you can give them. And if you miss those, you are not just missing opportunities, you are slowly reshaping the relationship without even realizing it. And the truth is, Max was never asking for more time, more toys, or more effort. He was asking for something much simpler, something Daniel had access to every single day, but had not yet learned how to give in the way that truly reached him. The first thing Max had been waiting for was never loud, never dramatic, and never something Daniel would have thought to measure. It happened in the quietest part of the day, in the space between waking up and everything else, when the world had not yet rushed in and taken over. Because for a dog, that moment is not empty, it is the most emotionally open point in the entire day. And every single morning, Max was already there before Daniel even opened his eyes, listening to the shift in his breathing, the slight movement under the blanket, the first sign that the person who defined his entire world was about to come back into it. And when Daniel finally stirred, Max would lift his head just slightly, not jumping, not whining, just watching, waiting for that one thing: eye contact, real eye contact, the kind that lasts longer than a second, the kind that says you are not just here, you matter. And when it happened, even briefly, Max's entire body would soften, his tail would move slowly, his breathing would settle, because in that moment, his brain was not just registering presence, it was registering safety, connection, belonging. But most mornings, Daniel did not realize this exchange was even happening. He would reach for his phone, turn away, stand up too quickly, and move on, not out of neglect, but because to him, that moment did not carry weight. It felt optional, something small, something he could skip without consequence. And that is the difference, because to a human, a missed glance is nothing, but to a dog, it can be the difference between starting the day feeling connected or starting it feeling uncertain. And over time, those small missed connections begin to stack, not in a way that breaks the bond, but in a way that quietly reshapes it, because dogs do not stop loving you when you miss these moments, they simply adjust to them, they lower their expectations, they wait a little less eagerly, they hold back just a little more. And the tragedy is that most owners never see this shift happening, because it does not come with noise or conflict. It comes with silence, with patience, with a kind of understanding that asks for very little but feels everything. And Max was still there every morning, still watching, still hoping, but the space between what he needed and what he received was growing, not because Daniel did not love him, but because he had never been shown how something as simple as looking into his dog's eyes for just a few seconds could mean more than any routine he had carefully built around him. The second thing Max had been quietly hoping for was not something that took hours, or effort, or planning. It lived in the smallest pauses of the day, in the moments Daniel usually rushed through without noticing, because to Max, love was not about what happened when Daniel had free time, it was about what happened in between everything else, the seconds that most people overlook, like when Daniel stood in the kitchen waiting for his coffee to brew, or when he paused by the door before heading out, or even when he sat down for just a minute before turning on the television. Those were the moments Max watched most closely, because in those unclaimed pieces of time, there was a choice, a simple one, to stay present or to move on. And every time Daniel chose to move on without acknowledging him, Max felt it, not as rejection, but as distance, a small emotional gap that formed and then faded, only to form again the next time. And this is where the second act of love lives, not in doing more, but in staying just a little longer than you normally would, because when Max walked up and gently leaned his body against Daniel's leg, he was not just being affectionate, he was grounding himself, using Daniel as a point of safety, a way to regulate his own sense of calm in a world he experiences through constant awareness. And when Daniel absent-mindedly reached down for a quick pat and then pulled his hand away, the connection started but never fully landed, like a sentence cut off before it could be understood. And over time, those half moments begin to shape how a dog approaches you, not with less love, but with more caution, more hesitation, because they learn that the window for connection is brief and unpredictable, and Max had already started to adapt to that pattern. Instead of pressing in fully, he would pause just before contact, as if asking a silent question: is this a moment where I am allowed to stay, or one where I will be brushed aside? And Daniel never noticed that shift, because it was subtle, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for, but it mattered more than anything else. Because to a dog, physical closeness is not just comfort, it is communication, it is reassurance, it is the way they confirm that the bond is still there, still steady, still mutual. And the truth is, Max was not asking Daniel to stop his day, to change his schedule, or to give up anything important. He was only asking for a few extra seconds, the kind of seconds that feel insignificant to a human, but to a dog, define the difference between simply existing near you and truly feeling connected to you. The third thing Max had been hoping for was something Daniel believed he was already giving, something that looked complete on the surface but felt different from Max's side of the experience, because every evening, without fail, Daniel would grab the leash, call Max over, and take him on a walk around the block, a routine that seemed consistent, responsible, even generous. And for a while, it was enough. Max would walk beside him with energy, stopping to sniff, looking up occasionally, matching Daniel's pace as best he could. But over time, something subtle began to change, not in the distance they walked, Not in the time they spent outside, but in the quality of the moment itself, because for Daniel, the walk was a task to complete, something to check off before dinner, something that fit neatly into his schedule. But for Max, the walk was not about movement, it was about connection, about sharing an experience together, about being mentally and emotionally engaged with the one person who defined his world. And when Daniel walked while looking at his phone, or thinking about work, or rushing slightly to get back home, Max felt that shift immediately, not as disappointment, but as disconnection, because dogs are not following your steps, they are following your attention. And when that attention is somewhere else, the walk becomes something entirely different to them. It becomes a solo experience happening next to you instead of with you. And Max began to adjust to that without making a sound. He still walked, still followed, still stayed close. But the moments where he used to look up at Daniel started to fade, replaced by longer pauses at the end of the leash. More time spent sniffing, not just out of curiosity, but as a way to fill the space where connection used to be. And this is where the third act of love lives. Not in how far you go or how long you stay outside, but in whether you are truly there with your dog while it is happening. Because when Daniel slowed down just once, when he put his phone away and let Max explore at his own pace, something changed instantly. Max's body relaxed, his tail moved differently, his steps became lighter, and he looked back up again. Not to check where Daniel was, but to reconnect, to confirm that they were sharing the same moment again. And that is what he had been waiting for. Not another mile, not another routine, but the feeling that they were experiencing something together. Because to a dog, a walk is not just exercise, it is a conversation. And when that conversation is one-sided or rushed or distracted, the meaning behind it fades, no matter how consistent it is. And Max was never asking Daniel to walk farther or longer, he was only asking him to walk differently, to be present, to notice him, to let the moment belong to both of them, even if only for a few minutes. The fourth thing Max had been quietly waiting for was something Daniel thought he understood, something most people believe comes naturally, but often gets replaced by something faster, louder, and less meaningful. And that was the way Daniel greeted him when he came home. Because every single day, without fail, Max heard the sound of the car before it even pulled into the driveway. His ears would perk up, his body would lift, and within seconds he would be at the door, completely focused, completely present. Because to him, that moment was not just a routine, it was the emotional peak of his entire day, the return of the one person his world revolved around. And when the door finally opened, Max would step forward, tail moving, eyes locked onto Daniel, waiting for that connection, not excitement for its own sake, but recognition, acknowledgement, a calm and steady presence that told him everything was safe again. But Daniel, like most people, responded with energy instead of presence. He would walk in quickly, speak loudly, sometimes laugh, sometimes rush past, while saying a quick hello. And while it looked like happiness, it created something different in Max's mind, because dogs do not need you to match their excitement, they need you to anchor it, to bring it back down, to show them that the world is stable and predictable. And when that does not happen, the moment becomes overwhelming instead of grounding. And over time, Max began to change how he approached the door. Instead of stepping forward fully, he would hesitate just slightly, watching Daniel more carefully, reading his movements, trying to understand what kind of energy was coming through that door, because he had learned that it was not always the same, and that inconsistency made the moment less certain, less secure, even though the love behind it had never changed. And this is where the fourth act of love lies, not in how excited you are to see your dog, but in how present and steady you are when you return to them. Because what your dog needs most in that moment is not intensity, it is clarity, a calm voice, a slower movement, a few seconds of grounded attention that allows their nervous system to settle instead of spike, and the difference is immediate when it happens. Because the next time Daniel paused at the door, took a breath, lowered his voice, and let Max come to him instead of rushing past, Max responded differently. His tail still moved, but his body softened, his breathing slowed, and instead of jumping or pacing, he stayed close, steady, connected, as if something inside him had finally aligned. And that is what he had been waiting for all along. Not more energy, not more noise, but a moment that felt safe enough to fully arrive in. Because to a dog, coming home is not just about being back together, it is about how that reunion feels, and whether it reinforces the bond or quietly unsettles it. The fifth thing Max had been hoping for was something so simple that Daniel never considered it could be missing, because it did not look like an action at all. It looked like nothing, like stillness, like quiet, like just being there without doing anything else. and yet to Max, those were the moments that carried the most weight, the times when there was no distraction, no movement, no task pulling Daniel's attention away, just presence. Shared and uninterrupted, and those moments had become rare without Daniel even realizing it, because every time he sat down, the television turned on, or his phone came out, or his mind drifted somewhere else, and even though Max was right there, lying beside him, close enough to feel the warmth of his leg, the connection never fully landed. It was partial, divided, stretched thin across multiple directions, and Max adapted the only way he knew how, by lowering his expectations of that space, by settling for proximity instead of connection, by resting near Daniel instead of with him, and that difference, though invisible to most people, is everything to a dog, because dogs do not just want to be near you, they want to feel you with them, fully there, fully present, even if nothing is happening at all, and this is where the fifth act of love lives, in the ability to sit in silence without reaching for something else, to let a few minutes pass where your dog has your full attention without competition, because when Daniel finally did this, not intentionally at first, but by accident, something shifted in a way he could actually feel. One evening he came home more tired than usual, skipped the television, left his phone on the counter, and simply sat down on the couch, and Max, sensing the difference immediately, approached more slowly than usual, as if unsure whether this moment would hold or disappear like the others, and when he rested his head gently against Daniel's leg, Daniel did not move, did not reach for anything, did not break the moment, he just stayed there, and within seconds, Max's entire body softened in a way Daniel had not seen in a long time, his breathing slowed, his eyes closed halfway, and for the first time in a while, he leaned fully into the contact instead of holding back, because his body finally felt safe enough to do so, and that is the part most people never understand, that a dog's ability to fully relax around you is not automatic, it is built moment by moment, through consistency, through presence, through small signals that say you are here and you are not going anywhere right now, and Max had not stopped loving Daniel, not even close, but he had stopped expecting those fully present moments to happen, and when one finally did, it reached him in a way that no toy, no treat, no routine ever could, because to a dog, being with you is not about what you are doing together, it is about whether you are truly there while it is happening. And sometimes the most meaningful thing you can give them is nothing at all except your undivided attention. The last thing Max had been waiting for was something Daniel never thought to question, because it felt so natural, so automatic, that it never crossed his mind it could be done differently, and that was the way he ended each day, the final moments before everything went quiet, when the lights went off, when the house settled, when the world outside faded away and it was just the two of them again, because for Max, that moment was not simply the end of the day, it was the emotional closing of everything that had happened, the last chance to confirm that the bond between them was still intact, still steady, still safe enough to rest inside, and every night, Max would find his place near Daniel, sometimes at the foot of the bed, sometimes just outside the bedroom door, always close enough to feel connected, always aware of where Daniel was, because in a dog's mind, sleep is not just rest, it is vulnerability, and where they choose to settle tells you everything about where they feel safest, and for a long time, Max had always chosen Daniel without hesitation, without distance, without doubt, but slowly, in ways Daniel had not noticed, the distance had begun to shift, not dramatically, not in a way that raised concern, but in inches, in small adjustments, in subtle repositioning that reflected something deeper, because when the emotional needs of a dog are only partially met throughout the day, it does not always show in obvious ways, it shows in where they choose to place themselves when they are most vulnerable, and Max had started to settle just a little farther away, not because he trusted Daniel less, but because the connection had become less consistent, less predictable, and that uncertainty carries into the quietest moments of the night, and one evening, without planning to, Daniel noticed it, he noticed that Max was not as close as he used to be, not as fully settled, and for the first time, something about it did not feel right, it felt like a question he did not know how to answer, and instead of turning off the light and moving on like he usually would, Daniel paused. He looked at Max, really looked this time, and called him over softly, not with urgency, not with distraction, but with intention, and Max hesitated for just a second before getting up and walking closer, and when Daniel reached down and rested his hand gently on him, not for a second, not halfway, but fully present, something shifted in that moment, something quiet but undeniable. Max's body relaxed in a way that had been missing, his breathing slowed, and he settled back into that space like it had always been his, because what he had been waiting for was never complicated, it was never out of reach, it was simply consistency, presence, small moments repeated in a way that made the connection feel real again, and that is the truth most people never